The morning light filtered softly through the threadbare curtains of Lily's small apartment, casting gentle shadows on a room that bore witness to struggles too heavy for a 17-year-old to carry alone. In the quiet hush of dawn, Lily cradled her newborn, her eyes red-rimmed and distant from sleep. Every day felt like a battle, a fight not only against the relentless demands of motherhood, but also against the inner storm of isolation and despair. With gentle hands and an unyielding compassion, she had made it her life's mission to care for those society often overlooked. It wasn't just a job for Margaret, it was a calling born out of her own history of loss and renewal. When she received the call to help Lily, she saw not just a teen mom overwhelmed by the weight of her responsibilities, but a young soul fighting desperately for a chance at a better life. Margaret arrived at Lily's modest apartment one rainy afternoon, the skies weeping a reflection of the inner turmoil of the young mother. Lily, hesitant at first, soon welcomed the caretaker's gentle presence. Over time, Margaret became an anchor in Lily's turbulent world, a steady source of guidance and unconditional kindness. Every morning, Margaret prepared warm breakfasts and sang soft lullabies as Lily struggled to manage both her infant's needs and the burdens of her own young adulthood. In moments of quiet, the two women exchanged stories. Lily, of dreams deferred and a future marred by responsibility. Margaret, of years spent healing broken hearts and mending lives. The walls of the apartment gradually absorbed Margaret's soothing influence. The stale air was replaced with whispered confidences, shared hopes, and sometimes, even laughter that dared to rise above the constant drone of hardship. Margaret offered advice on managing finances, on finding small joys in a world that often seemed so cruel, and on the importance of self-care, even when self-care seemed a luxury. She became the steady light in Lily's darkened corridors, a guide whose care was as genuine as it was deep. Despite the tender progress within the apartment's walls, not everyone saw Margaret's presence as a blessing. Lily's estranged mother and distant relatives, wary of anyone stepping into their troubled family dynamics, began to view Margaret with suspicion. Their disapproval was loud, filled with whispered criticisms and cold stares whenever the caretaker visited. They believed that Lily needed to learn to endure hardship on her own, convinced that external help only fostered dependency. One overcast afternoon, as the rain pounded the window pane in a rhythm that mirrored Lily's racing heartbeat, a fateful meeting took place. The agency responsible for assigning Margaret to Lily's case had received multiple complaints from family members. They argued that Margaret's unconventional methods, her insistence on gentle discipline, and the emotional closeness she fostered were overstepping professional boundaries. In the eyes of the agency's administrators, who valued rigid protocols over heartfelt empathy, Margaret's personalized care was a liability. Lily's world, fragile as it was, began to crumble. The following week, a terse letter arrived at her doorstep, the official language of bureaucracy conveying a cold decree. The decision was final. Margaret, despite her decades of experience and her genuine care for Lily and her baby, was fired. The loss hit both women with the force of a tidal wave. The day of Margaret's departure was marked by a sky swollen with the promise of rain, a fitting backdrop for a farewell that carried an unspoken grief. In the dim light of early morning, Margaret packed a small bag, every item a memento of the battles fought and the bonds forged. She paused in the doorway of Lily's apartment, her eyes lingering on the photograph of Lily smiling for the first time with her baby, a moment of pure, unadulterated hope captured in a single frame. "I wish things could be different," Margaret murmured, her voice heavy with both resignation and love. "You deserve more than the pain this world gives." Lily, standing in the doorway as well, felt a wrench in her heart. "But why must you leave?" "You've been my light," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. In that moment, the reality of their parting was a cruel reminder that sometimes the kindest souls are forced to step away, their compassion met with the harshness of societal expectations and rigid rules. Margaret's exit was not one of anger or defiance. It was a quiet, sorrowful retreat. She walked away slowly, each step echoing the silent farewell of a bond that had grown in the most unlikely of places. The sound of the rain seemed to follow her, a mournful accompaniment to the end of a chapter that had brought hope into a life marred by hardship. In the weeks that followed Margaret's departure, Lily's apartment felt unbearably empty. The absence of the caretaker's gentle guidance left a void that no amount of determination could quickly fill. The burdens of motherhood, now unassisted, weighed even heavier. Nights turned into long, desolate hours filled with regret and longing for the supportive presence that had once made the challenges bearable. Lily's mother, who had long harbored her own bitterness and disappointment, saw the absence of Margaret as vindication of her beliefs. Instead of understanding the profound impact the caretaker had on her daughter, she dismissed it as a necessary step toward toughening Lily up for a harsh world. The criticism was relentless, and Lily, isolated and overwhelmed, began to internalize the notion that she had failed in every possible way. But in the quiet recesses of her heart, Lily clung to the memory of Margaret's gentle smile, her kind words, and the warmth of her presence. Late at night, when the world was asleep and the burden of loneliness pressed heavily upon her, Lily would sometimes whisper into the darkness, "Thank you for caring. I promise I'll be strong." These murmurs were both a tribute to Margaret's sacrifice and a vow that her light would continue to burn, even in the absence of its source. Time, as it inevitably does, continued its slow, unyielding march forward. The scars of loss and hardship remained etched on Lily's heart, a constant reminder of the fleeting nature of support in a world quick to turn its back on the compassionate. Yet, amidst the sorrow, a quiet resilience began to emerge. Lily sought out new ways to cope with her reality, attending counseling sessions, seeking out community support groups, and slowly, painfully, learning to rebuild the fragments of her shattered self. Margaret's departure left behind an unintended legacy, a legacy of quiet bravery and the realization that sometimes the most significant acts of love are the ones that go unnoticed. Though she was fired and forced to leave, Margaret's influence lingered like a warm ember in Lily's soul. In moments of despair, when the darkness threatened to swallow her whole, Lily recalled the words of the caretaker, her gentle admonition to always look for the light, even in the bleakest of times. In a bittersweet twist of fate, the very act of being fired transformed into a catalyst for Lily's growth. It forced her to confront the harsh realities of life, to acknowledge that true strength often arises from the deepest wounds. And while the absence of Margaret was a source of persistent sorrow, it also served as a constant reminder that unconditional love can sometimes be the quiet, invisible force that inspires us to rise above our circumstances. Years later, as Lily stood before a group of young mothers at a local community center, she recounted her journey, a story interwoven with pain, loss, and ultimately, the quiet triumph of resilience. With a gentle smile that carried both gratitude and lingering sadness, she spoke of a kind caretaker who had once been her beacon of hope. "There was someone who cared enough to stand by me when I felt utterly alone," Lily said softly, her eyes reflecting memories of long-forgotten tears. "And though fate tore us apart, her compassion continues to guide me, even now." In that moment, the legacy of Margaret's sacrifice was reborn, not as a tale of dismissal and regret, but as an enduring testament to the transformative power of kindness. The story of a home caretaker who helped a struggling teen mom, only to be fired, was now woven into the fabric of a new generation, a reminder that even in the face of loss, the light of compassion can ignite hope for a brighter tomorrow. Years had softened the edges of Lily's early pain, but the memory of Margaret, the gentle soul who had once stood by her side, remained a persistent beacon in the recesses of her heart. Now in her mid-20s, Lily had transformed her hardship into strength, dedicating herself to mentoring young mothers at the community center that had become her sanctuary. Yet every evening, in the quiet solitude of her small apartment, Lily would replay the tender moments they had shared, feeling both gratitude and an aching emptiness at Margaret's absence. Determined to fill that void, Lily resolved to find Margaret. The recollection of those rainy afternoons and whispered promises drove her to gather every scrap of information she could. With the help of community networks and old contacts from the agency that once placed Margaret in her home, Lily began a painstaking search, a journey marked by both hope and lingering sorrow. Lily's quest led her from the familiar corners of her neighborhood to community centers and shelters where whispers of a dedicated volunteer echoed through the halls. She discovered that after being dismissed, Margaret had drifted from one caregiving role to another, finding solace in aiding those who had nowhere else to turn. Her compassion, though bruised by the harsh judgments of a rigid bureaucracy, had not been extinguished. It had merely taken refuge in quieter, more humble settings. Late one rainy afternoon, reminiscent of the day Margaret had left, Lily found herself outside a modest community center tucked away in a quiet part of town. Inside, a local shelter was hosting a support group for women overcoming life's cruelties. As Lily stepped into the softly lit room, she caught sight of a familiar figure in the corner, a woman whose kind eyes and gentle demeanor stirred memories of a time when hope had felt almost tangible. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence was filled with the unspoken words of lost time and the tender ache of remembrance. Finally, Margaret looked up, her eyes widening as recognition dawned. "Lily?" she whispered, voice trembling with disbelief and longing. Tears welled in Lily's eyes as she stepped forward, her voice choked with emotion. "I've been searching for you for so long. I needed to thank you, and to tell you that your kindness never left me." Margaret's face, lined with the memories of years filled with quiet struggles and small victories, softened into a fragile smile. "I'm sorry I left the way I did. I was forced away, but not without leaving a part of me behind." Her words were a bittersweet admission of the sacrifices she'd made, and the guilt that still haunted her for the abruptness of her departure. In that tender exchange, years of separation melted away. They sat together as the support group continued around them, sharing memories of hardships and triumphs. Margaret recounted how the sting of being fired had sent her into a spiral of self-doubt, yet also how it ultimately led her to serve others in ways that felt truer to her compassionate nature. Lily listened intently, each word affirming that the love and care once bestowed was far from lost. It had grown, quietly, in unexpected places. Their reunion was not a mere revisiting of the past, but the beginning of a new chapter. Together, Lily and Margaret resolved to honor the sacrifices that had once seemed so painful. They organized community workshops and support groups where former struggles could be transformed into lessons of resilience and hope. In sharing their story, they created a safe space for others who were fighting battles that too often went unnoticed. For Margaret, the reunion was a bittersweet vindication, an opportunity to see that despite the cruelty of a system that had once cast her aside, her compassion had left an indelible mark on a life that was slowly learning to bloom. For Lily, it was a chance to reclaim a part of her past, a reminder that even the deepest wounds can give way to healing when nurtured by genuine care. As the days turned to months, their bond grew stronger. The community center became a haven of warmth and solidarity, its walls echoing with laughter, shared sorrows, and the promise of new beginnings. And every now and then, on quiet, rainy afternoons, Lily and Margaret would sit side by side, letting the soft patter of rain and the glow of a fading sunset remind them that even in life's darkest moments, the light of compassion can be rekindled. Late one autumn evening, dark clouds gathered with a fierce intensity, heralding a storm more violent than any in recent memory. The community center, once a beacon of hope and sanctuary for struggling teen moms and their children, now braced against nature's fury. Rain lashed relentlessly against the windows, and the wind howled as if echoing the long-held sorrows of those within its walls. Inside, Lily and Margaret moved with determined urgency. The center's occupants, a mix of young mothers and vulnerable souls, huddled in quiet corners as Lily rallied them with gentle yet firm reassurances. Margaret, her eyes steeled by past heartache, coordinated with volunteers to secure fragile records and vital supplies. Every creak of the aging building under the storm's assault felt like a reminder of past wounds, of the day Margaret was fired, of the bitter cold bureaucracy that had once separated her from Lily. In a rare lull between thunderclaps, Lily and Margaret found a moment of solitude by a water-streaked window. The storm's roar faded into a distant murmur, and in that quiet space, the weight of memories pressed upon them. "I was so afraid that night, not just of the storm, but of being left alone again," Lily confessed, her voice trembling as tears welled in her eyes. Margaret reached out, her hand firm and reassuring. "I know, Lily. And tonight, as we face this together, we prove that even the fiercest storm can't break us," she whispered, her tone a blend of compassion and quiet resolve. Hours passed in a tense vigil as the storm battered the center. The building shuddered under the relentless force, yet, against all odds, its walls held. When the tempest finally began to subside, a fragile calm descended. Dawn crept in through ragged clouds, revealing a battered, but not broken, community center. The survivors emerged, their spirits bruised yet unyielding. In that fragile light, the scars on the building mirrored the invisible marks on their hearts, each a testament to past hardships and the resilience born from them. The ordeal left Lily and Margaret with a renewed awareness of life's precarious nature. For Lily, the night's terror was a stark reminder that safety was transient, and the comfort of care could vanish as swiftly as a storm. For Margaret, it evoked the bittersweet memory of being forced away, a reminder of how deeply the system's cruelty could cut even the kindest souls. Yet, as they began to assess the damage and plan for repair, both women understood that the path to healing was never linear. Each setback, each unexpected trial, was a chapter in a larger story of survival and transformation. Standing amidst the wreckage in the quiet aftermath, Margaret's gaze met Lily's. "Even as we rebuild these walls, remember that we're also mending ourselves. The pain may linger, but our compassion and strength will always guide us forward," she said softly. Lily nodded, absorbing those words as if they were a promise, a beacon to carry her through future storms. In that poignant moment, the storm became more than a meteorological event. It was a mirror reflecting the enduring struggles of their past, and a catalyst urging them to rebuild not just a shelter, but a community and a life imbued with hope. The scars, both physical and emotional, would remain as indelible emblems of their journey, a journey marked by loss, heartache, and, above all, the relentless power of compassion to illuminate even the darkest nights.